Hell no!
So hey guys, Sam from Infinitum here, and welcome back to another video of our Clip Studio tutorial. For this video, we'll be covering the line art section, so pick up your pens again, and let's get back to drawing Eren Jaeger from Shingeki no Kyojin. So I know I said that in the last video I would post the second part a week after that. It's been more than a week already, obviously. Well, I have an alibi for that. I was kind of distracted because Clip Studio was hosting an international illustration contest and I just couldn't help it. This is my first time participating in such a contest. So I thought, why not, you know? So anyway, if you're curious how my entry looked like, here's my entry. Looks interesting, doesn't it? So anyway, we're going to be covering two topics this time. I won't be covering too many. I will be covering the line art tips and tricks if you guys are more curious into how to approach this line art process, because it can be a little tricky at times. And the second point would be the actual line art. So getting back on topic, we're going to continue drawing Eren Jaeger from Attack on Titan. If you want to know what happened in the previous episode, check the video up there. It's ready for you to click. So yeah, let's begin. Just to give you a little bit of context, from the actual line art time-lapse video that I put in this video, it's actually been done quite some time ago. My methods have kind of changed since I now split my line art section into several layers, as I probably mentioned in the sketch video. I can give you a bit of an idea why I do that. For example, here is my International Illustration Contest entry. We're going to focus a bit more on the girl in this picture because the line art here was a bit more distinguishable compared to my male character in this picture. So going into the girl, we'll just stick to the face. You will notice that the line art section has been split into several layers. You can actually split into more layers than that, but I try not to have too many layers for the line art because if I have too many, it will get out of control, especially when I am editing it at times. But splitting into several layers can be helpful at times compared to having it all in one layer. All in one layer can be a bit troublesome. Take it from me, for example. I've had a lot of trouble with my past characters, and it is much more interesting when you have line art that goes into different colors besides black, because it gives it a bit more dynamic feel, but you don't want it to exactly blend like completely with your coloring. That way your line art is invisible and it kind of looks a bit strange at times. For this artwork, I mean, there are other types of styles. With those types of art styles, it may be more appropriate to do that, but for the art style I'm showing you here, it's not that appropriate. So you will notice I have chopped the layers into several sections. I'm just going to take away the background so it'll be a bit more easier to explain to the boy. So I'm going to get off topic. I can remove the hat and band. You will notice the section disappears, just those sections. So any line art that have the hair involved will go under a separate layer called hair, and eyes will be in a separate layer. Skin, I decided to put the hat and band in a separate layer just because their colors are a bit more contrasting compared to the clothes. It'll be quite boring if the entire line art is completely black. So for the skin, it's a bit more grayish in a sense and a bit more lighter, closer to the skin color, but still a bit grayish, so it's distinguishable. The eyes remain black, but if I had kept the eyes and the hair line art too close into one layer, because they're quite close to each other, and I tried to add the coloring texture, as you can see over here, that I put a bit of a red because I lock up the transparent pixels and I try to draw it, it'll end up going onto the hair line art, especially if my brush is too large. So I want to try to avoid that, so that's why I separate the eyes and the hair into different layers. So that is the general idea, just to give you a bit of context on why I kind of split the line art and how much it can actually benefit you guys compared to putting all the line art into one layer. I know a lot of digital artists that they actually split their line art into even more layers than I do. First off, before I move on, here's the completed version of my line art. In my time-lapse video, I've actually did it into one layer, but during my free time off camera, I kind of decided to split into 4 different layers: the hair, eyes, clothes, and skin. I've already assigned the colors, if you have noticed. I'll just take it off for a second. Just ready for the third part. I'm being prepared, don't worry. Some areas the line art is pretty thick, right? For example, the neck area, where you can see over here, it kind of gives a bit of a shadow. You know, that is a recommendation kind of given by Learn to Draw Manga. She kind of recommends that to kind of give it a bit more dynamic feel. If your line art thickness is about the same all the way, it kind of looks a bit too bland, too 2D, you know, like too on paper. You want the picture to kind of jump out at you. So even though it's still 2D, naturally, it kind of gives you a bit more of a shadowy feel, because later on you add lighter shadows, but in line art you can add thicker shadows. You change your line art color, it kind of gives it a bit more of an interesting coloring when you change the color of your line art. So moving on to a new canvas, just to further explain how that works, we're going to use the pen. To know when to actually put these sorts of like shadow parts is usually when you come across like a T-shaped or like a 90-degree angle, or maybe a bit more tighter. So if here's close to a 90-degree angle, say that happens into your picture, then what we do is we add the shadow. So what we do is we draw it like this and simply just fill it. To me, it looked a bit too straight, which is not natural. So what I do is I kind of add a bit more on the side here and color it in. So that is what I do. Now for my brush settings when doing line art, I usually just do the G pen. I kind of keep everything at default. My stabilization is 10 pixels usually, but if I do longer distance, I would do maybe a bit higher, up to 20 pixels. Any higher, it lags a bit too much compared to 20 pixels. My brush size usually ranges depending on the situation. Usually I will keep it to 17 pixels. The last time for 300 dpi A4 paper, I would usually do a 30 pixel brush, but it was a bit too thick, so I have decided that I range it down to about 17 pixels, which is moderately there. If you prefer a more thicker line art, that is completely fine. I can think of a few TV shows that actually do thick line art, not illustration, but I can think of a few anime. For example, Wit Studio kind of does quite thick line art, but I find 30 pixels is too large for my taste, so it completely ranges. Especially when you come to the hair, you might want to make your line art slightly thinner than usual so that you kind of see more color than black line art. But if you're coloring the line art, that's completely different then. So moving on, my start and ending kind of ranges. If you've seen my first part of our Clip Studio tutorial, I talked a bit more of the start and ending. If you're curious where to find it, you just go to the wrench icon, which it goes to subtool detail. Otherwise, I naturally just stick to the G pen, and my line art is very default. Actually, I can think of a few artists that probably customize an entirely new pen preset, which is up to you guys, but for me, I just stick to default. It gives me the effect I want anyway. Now, another trick I also do with line art, if you're in a rush, if you look at the process of doing line art, it's really slow, because for me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and doing line art is a bit slow, especially if the line art didn't come out smooth and straight. I'll be really so I try to explore a bit more on that area. Finally, I would just like to say, like, your line art is very long and you want to take a quick shortcut. I use figures, as you can see in this little clip. I simply just use figures to extend. Say like I'm doing the entire body, I'll just use figures just to keep moving faster. But when I just get up to the smaller details, I will use a pen. So
genius!
That's it for this part of the tip and tricks. Now we're moving on to the actual line art. Moving on to the actual line art, we're going to be seeing it pre-record again, like the last video. So first of all, we start with the actual sketch. I will usually lower the opacity to about 20 pixels. And line art is a very simple thing, even though it may take longer than most processes, but it's actually the most easiest process to go, because once you've actually satisfied with the sketch, line art is very easy. As I kept mentioning over and over again in the first part, showing my tips and tricks, I drew the line art into one whole entire layer. However, I would suggest to split it into several layers, like just categorize it into what color you plan to actually color your line art with, to blend it with whatever fill you're coloring. As you can see, my line art here, I've actually been using a 17 pixel thickness, which is okay naturally, but nowadays I kind of prefer to a bit more dynamic and to use a variety of different sizes, so it's actually more suggestible to do that. So you'll notice I am using figures in this section. Yes, I've noticed that my swords on the badge were upside down, so that was my perfect time to actually fix it at the same time. So even though line art may be a bit final, it's still not too late for you to fix it, because you're not on a piece of paper, it's not traditional. So if you mess it up, just clean it, just undo, you know? So that is literally the easiest section. The only grinding part with line art is its duration. It still took me over 40 minutes just to do line art of this, my international illustration contest. I was a bit more open with the figures. So for example, here, let me just show you what line art looks like in real time. You see what I mean? It can take really long, you know? So you just need to be patient. That's the number one virtue with line art, patience. And for me, I try to be perfect with line art, so I should take really long time. That's the line art section of this video. The actual line art part may be a bit short for this tutorial, but it's actually really simple once you actually get the sketch done. So it's all about just exploring the areas and be a bit more open to a variety of brush sizes depending on the situation. For example, for the hair, I've made sure that the line art stays as thin as possible. It's meant to be thinner than the skin and all that. The clothes, I'll make it a bit more thicker. In corners, I will use a thicker brush as well. And the eyes, I'm actually exploring my approach with the eyes, but in these eyes, I kind of just simply use a thinner brush so that it'll look a bit more nicer, but keep it open. A lot of artists actually have different ways of approaching the eyes section, so yeah. And I just realized my microphone was actually off the entire time of the actual line art section. There's some editing processes I gotta go through. So that is it for the line art section. If this line art video gets a lot of views, I expect to see some more likes down there to figure out if I should do a next part. I won't say now that the next part will come out next week. Although either way, if I don't get any likes or views, I will still keep going because I do not really like an incomplete series. So I will finish that nevertheless. But the more likes you get, the sooner I will have the next part come out. So just play around with those tools and try out the line art. I totally recommend you to split your line art into several layers. Easier when you're editing it finally. And especially you won't ruin it when you're using your transform tools, say like to reproportion it, so it won't affect other things that's not in that layer. That's why I say that splitting your line art into several layers is easy. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, why not drop that like rating down below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, and perhaps even subscribe to the channel to join us on our journey on YouTube. I'm Sam from Untitled, and I'll see you in the next video. Signing out.